I still hear her voice echoing in that courtroom, calm and convincing, telling everyone I was unstable, that I imagined things, that I needed help, not an inheritance. My own sister looked straight at the judge and painted me as a liar just to steal our dad's money, and the worst part is, people believed her. I remember sitting there, hands shaking, heart pounding, realizing that if I didn't fight back, I was about to lose not just my father's legacy, but my entire reputation. Was I wrong for deciding, in that moment, that I would expose her no matter the cost? Tell me honestly, if your own blood tried to destroy you like that, would you stay quiet or would you burn everything down to tell the truth? I guess to understand how it all got that far, I need to go back to the beginning, long before courtrooms and lawyers and whispered accusations. Growing up, it was just me, my older sister Rachel, and our dad. Our mom died when I was 8, and after that, everything in our house revolved around survival. Dad worked himself into the ground, took every overtime shift he could, and did his best to be both parents at once. Rachel was 5 years older than me, which meant she remembered more of our mom, and I think that shaped her in ways I didn't understand back then. She became protective, but also controlling. Even as kids, she liked being the one in charge, the one who knew better. If I wanted something, Rachel always had an opinion about why I didn't deserve it, or why it was a bad idea. As we grew older, that dynamic never really changed. I was the quiet one, the emotional one, the kid who cried easily and spent hours journaling or reading. Rachel was sharp, confident, outspoken. Teachers loved her. Adults trusted her instantly. If we ever argued, it somehow always became my fault, even when I knew it wasn't. Dad didn't mean to play favorites, but it happened anyway. Rachel was easier. She didn't question him, didn't challenge his decisions. I did. I asked why, I pushed back, I wanted explanations. So when Dad praised Rachel for being mature and responsible, I learned early that my role in the family was to be the difficult one. Despite all that, I loved my sister. I really did. I looked up to her, wanted her approval, wanted her to see me as an equal. When she went off to college, I cried for days. We talked on the phone every week and she gave me advice about boys, school, life. For a while, it felt like we were finally becoming close in a real way. But something shifted after Dad got sick. He was diagnosed with a heart condition when I was in my mid-20s. It wasn't immediately life-threatening, but it was serious enough that it forced all of us to confront the idea that he wouldn't be around forever. Rachel moved back home. To help. Or at least that's how she framed it. I was already living nearby, but suddenly Rachel took over everything. Doctor's appointments, medications, finances. Dad trusted her, maybe because she sounded confident, maybe because she reminded him of Mom in that way where she took charge. I tried to stay involved, but every time I asked a question or suggested something, Rachel brushed me off. "I've got it handled," she'd say, or, "You're just stressing Dad out." That was the first time I noticed how she subtly pushed me to the edges. She'd schedule appointments without telling me, then act surprised when I didn't show up. She'd make decisions and later say, "Well, you never said you wanted to be involved." If I protested, she'd sigh and look at Dad like I was being dramatic again. And Dad, exhausted and sick, would just ask me to please stop arguing. When Dad started talking about his will, things got worse. He mentioned wanting to make things equal between us, and Rachel smiled and nodded. But later that night she cornered me in the kitchen. I still remember the way the fridge light cast shadows on her face, as she spoke in a low voice, telling me that I wouldn't know what to do with a large inheritance, that it would overwhelm me. She suggested that maybe she should manage most of it for my own good. I laughed at first, thinking she was joking, but she wasn't laughing back. Her eyes were cold, calculating. That was the first time I felt genuinely uneasy around my own sister. Dad passed away 2 years later. Losing him shattered me. I spiraled into grief, barely functioning for months. Rachel, on the other hand, seemed composed, efficient. She handled the funeral arrangements, the paperwork, the condolences. People praised her strength, her grace. Meanwhile, I was crying in bathrooms and having panic attacks in grocery store aisles. I'll admit that I wasn't at my best. But grief doesn't make you incompetent. And it definitely doesn't make you crazy. The reading of the will should have been straightforward. Dad had always said he wanted things split evenly. But when we sat in that lawyer's office, Rachel's attorney slid a stack of documents across the table that I had never seen before. According to them, Dad had amended his will months before he died, leaving the majority of his estate to Rachel, with the justification that she had been his primary caregiver and that I was emotionally unstable and financially irresponsible. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. I looked at Rachel, waiting for her to say something, to admit this was a misunderstanding. Instead, she avoided my eyes. The lawyer explained that there were also medical affidavits and statements supporting the claim that Dad had been concerned about my mental health. Statements signed by doctors I had never met. I challenged it immediately. I told them Dad would never have said those things. Rachel finally spoke then, her voice soft, almost sad, telling me that Dad had been worried about me for years, that he just hadn't known how to talk to me about it. She said she was sorry I had to find out this way. I felt betrayed on a level I didn't know was possible. I hired my own lawyer and contested the will. That's when Rachel went nuclear. She filed motions questioning my competency, suggesting that my grief and history of emotional instability made me an unreliable witness. She brought up moments from my life out of context, the time I took a leave of absence from work due to anxiety, the therapy sessions I'd openly talked about, even journal entries I'd once shared with her in confidence. Somehow, she had access to them. She twisted everything into evidence that I was delusional, paranoid, unfit. By the time we reached the courtroom, I already felt defeated. Rachel walked in like she owned the place, dressed perfectly, greeting people with composed smiles. I felt small, exposed, like everyone was already judging me, and then she took the stand. She lied. Calmly, confidently. She told the court that I had imagined arguments with Dad that never happened, that I accused her of stealing long before there was ever an inheritance to steal. She claimed Dad had confided in her that he was afraid of me, afraid that I'd squander the money or hurt myself. Each sentence felt like a knife. I wanted to scream, to stand up and call her a liar, but my lawyer squeezed my arm, reminding me to stay quiet. As she spoke, I realized something terrifying. Rachel wasn't just trying to win the inheritance. She was trying to erase me, to redefine my entire identity in the eyes of the law as unstable, unreliable, crazy. If she succeeded, it wouldn't just cost me money, it would follow me forever. And that's where I'm going to pause for now. Because that moment, sitting there listening to my own sister dismantle my life piece by piece, was the point where everything changed. That was the moment I stopped thinking of this as a legal battle and started seeing it as a fight for my sanity, my truth, and my father's memory. Before I tell you what I did next, before I tell you how I decided to fight back, I want you to really think about this and tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were me. Would you walk away to protect your peace, or would you dig in and risk everything to expose someone who knows all your weaknesses? In the next part, I'll tell you how I found the one thing Rachel never thought I'd look for, and how the lie she told in court began to unravel in ways neither of us expected. If you're on my side so far, make sure you're ready, because the worst and the most satisfying parts of this story are still coming. I left off at the moment everything inside me snapped. When I realized my sister wasn't just trying to win money, she was trying to officially brand me as crazy in the eyes of the law. I remember walking out of that courtroom on shaky legs, the air outside feeling too bright, too loud, like the world didn't understand that my life had just been ripped open. Rachel hugged people, thanked her lawyer, acted like the loving daughter carrying a heavy burden. She didn't even look at me, and in that moment, something inside me hardened. I knew if I stayed silent, her version of the story would become the truth forever. So I made a decision that night, sitting alone in my apartment surrounded by boxes of my dad's old things. I was going to prove she lied, even if it broke me in the process. Was I wrong to choose revenge mixed with justice at that point, or would you have done the same? I started where Rachel never expected me to start, with my dad's past, not hers. Everyone assumed she knew everything about his life, because she played the devoted caretaker role, but I knew my dad had secrets. Not bad ones, just private ones. He was old school, the kind of man who didn't tell his kids everything. As I went through his boxes, I found old notebooks, receipts, letters. At first it was just memories, things that made me cry until my chest hurt. But then I noticed patterns, dates that didn't line up with what Rachel had claimed in court. Doctor visits she said I missed that never happened. Medications she said he was on that weren't in any records I could find. That's when I requested his full medical history directly from the hospital. It took weeks, mountains of paperwork, and more than one breakdown on the phone with administrative staff, but eventually I got it. And when I read through it, my hands started to shake, not from fear this time, but from clarity. The doctors Rachel claimed had evaluated my mental health. They had never once noted concerns about me. In fact, several notes mentioned my father worrying about tension between his daughters, specifically noting that Rachel often spoke for him and answered questions he hadn't finished yet. I took this to my lawyer immediately. For the first time since this all started, I saw his expression change. Not polite concern, not cautious optimism, but real interest. He told me this didn't prove fraud yet, but it cracked the foundation of Rachel's story. We needed more. And that's when I remembered something small, something almost insignificant at the time, that suddenly felt huge. About 6 months before Dad died, he had called me late at night. His voice was weak, but clear. He told me he was confused about some paperwork Rachel had asked him to sign. He said she told him it was for insurance, but something about it didn't sit right with him. I remembered telling him to wait, that I'd come by the next day and look at it with him. When I arrived, the papers were gone. Rachel said Dad must have misplaced them. I believed her. I hated myself for that. I went back to his house, which Rachel still controlled. Legally, she was allowed to be there, but I had every right to retrieve my personal belongings. While she was at work, I went through the study. That's where I found it. A locked drawer I'd never seen before. It took me an hour and more than one YouTube video, but I got it open. Inside were copies of documents, not originals, but copies were enough. Power of attorney forms, drafts of a revised will, and handwritten notes from my dad, shaky but unmistakably his. He wrote that he felt pressured, that he didn't fully understand what he was signing, that he trusted Rachel, but he was afraid of conflict and didn't want to upset her. He wrote that he loved both of his daughters equally and wanted things split evenly. I collapsed on the floor and sobbed, not just because it proved I wasn't crazy, but because it showed how alone my dad must have felt at the end. We brought everything to the court. Rachel's confidence cracked for the first time when my lawyer presented the medical records and the notes. She tried to brush it off, saying Dad was confused, that the notes were taken out of context. Then came the moment I'll never forget. My lawyer called the doctor Rachel claimed had evaluated me. He testified under oath that he had never met me, not once. He said Rachel had asked him general questions about mental health in families, caring for ill parents, nothing more. The room shifted. I could feel it. The judge leaned forward. Rachel's lawyer objected repeatedly, but it was too late. The lie was out in the open. Rachel took the stand again, and this time, she wasn't calm. She stumbled over her words, contradicted herself, snapped at questions. When she looked at me, there was no sadness in her eyes anymore, only rage. Then I did something I hadn't planned on doing. I asked to speak. My lawyer hesitated, but the judge allowed it. I told the court about that late-night phone call, about the papers, about how I trusted my sister because she was my sister. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. I told them about my therapy, my anxiety, my grief, and how none of that made me incapable. It made me human. I asked the judge one simple question: if caring about your mental health makes you unfit, what does that say about all of us? The ruling didn't come that day, but the damage was done. A month later, the judge ruled that the amended will was invalid due to undue influence and misrepresentation. The estate would be divided equally, as my dad originally intended. Rachel didn't look at me when it was announced. She walked out before it was even over. The aftermath was quieter, but heavier. Rachel stopped speaking to me entirely. Some family members sided with her, saying I went too far, that I embarrassed her, that I should have let it go for the sake of peace. Others apologized for believing her. As for me, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Relieved, yes, but also grieving all over again. Not just my dad, but the sister I thought I had. I used part of my inheritance to set up a small scholarship in my dad's name, something he always talked about doing. Rachel didn't attend the dedication. I didn't expect her to. I've made peace with the fact that justice doesn't always come with reconciliation. Looking back, I know Rachel's biggest mistake wasn't lying about the money. It was underestimating me. She thought because I was emotional, because I struggled openly, that I was weak. She never realized that surviving those struggles made me strong enough to stand up in court and tell the truth. So that's my story. That's how my sister tried to make me look crazy to steal our dad's inheritance, and how the truth came out anyway. If you think I was right to fight back, like this video. If you think I should have handled it differently, tell me why in the comments. Subscribe for more real, messy, unbelievable stories like this, and share your final thoughts on this whole situation below. I'll see you all in the next story.